Hey you guys, welcome back to Rock Bottom Alchemy. My name is Tiffany. I'm so glad to have you here, guys. This podcast was born from the depths of my soul, from my own rock bottom, and from my own alchemizing of my rock bottom. Here we talk about all things spirituality, love, truth, freedom, our highs, our lows. This is a safe space for anyone who's at their rock bottom or not, anyone who's going through it and needs to know that there's other people out there that have blazed the trail ahead of them. I am not the first. I will not be the last. I am a cog in the wheel here to help guide you to healing. I have a big love for humanity and to seeing us all win, to seeing us all grow and show up as our fullest self. So basically what started this whole journey for me was my own rock bottom, and I moved into the woods. You guys, I disappeared into the woods with a desperate intent to heal from the trauma that had occurred in my life. I didn't really have a plan. I wasn't super spiritual when I got started on this journey. It just, it sort of all developed naturally. So I thought I would share some of my journey into spirituality, into believing in a higher power. When I was at my very lowest, I was bedridden, almost nonverbal, and my executive functioning was very low. It was truly a rock bottom. I was literally unemployable and could not show up in my own life. And from the bed that I was laying in, I cried out to the higher power that I wasn't confident existed. And I just said, if you're out there, God, if you're real, I surrender to you. Please put your hand over my life. Whatever it is that you need to see from me to show that I'm serious about learning my lessons and changing my ways and healing my path so that I can have a happy life. You've got it, God. Whatever you need from me. Guys, I was laying in bed. I couldn't even let my knees hit the ground because I was having autoimmune pain from head to toe. So it was a proverbial moment where my knees hit the ground, crying from bed, staring up at the popcorn ceiling, just wondering if there was somebody that I could call out to. And I said, if you're willing to beam me up out of this awful reality that I have found myself in, if you allow me to heal, I promise I will reach back and help the others. And that's what this podcast is for. That's why I've shown up here. The next year, so this was at the beginning of end of 23, beginning of 24. The next year was essentially the best and hardest year of my life. It was full of very hard lessons, but I remained committed to making my way through those lessons to seek the blessing on the other side. And the way that I started looking at life was from a perspective that we co-create our reality with God. And that when we find ourselves lost in the sauce, when our reality is awful day in and day out, it has something to do with what's going on within our minds. And so I adopted this radical growth mindset where I committed to looking at myself really critically. And instead of judging myself really hard for all of the places that I fell short and messed up, I met myself with compassion. And everything that I found that was ugly or needed work, instead of ignoring it, I looked closer at it. And I do that every day still. A healing journey is never done. But I think one of the main things that I took away overall was that healing is about stripping off what was never supposed to be there in the first place. We're born into this world where there's all of these rules and constructs and people who tear us down, and like even in our own families, family members who don't want to see us shine and will purposely deconstruct things like our confidence. There's a lot of people that that's how they operate in this world. School systems, governments, they want to keep people small and compliant and sterile so that they obey. From the age of 5 to adulthood, you're told to obey and memorize, and that's it, right? That's what we're told makes a good human. That's how you become a good employee. And if you're lucky, you get to relax in your 60s. So when I told God I would do whatever He needed from me, if He would extract me from the hell I was in, I really meant that. And that's the first step. You have to mean that with your whole chest, 10 toes down. If you're going to change your life, you have to be willing to go through the lessons and the muck and look at your darkness and your shadows and your triggers, and where you show up in a way that's co-creating a negative reality for you. So that was my overall understanding of how to heal, was just keep growing every single day. And so I ended up in the woods. That's a whole story in itself. But basically, my ex and I sold our house. I had enough money to go to the woods to heal. And it couldn't have come at a sooner moment. Because like I said, I was very suppressed emotionally, mentally, physically. My nervous system was in a state of shut down freeze. I was non-functioning. And I felt as though healing was the only choice I was left with. It felt like life or death, because if you're not healed enough to function in the world, if you can't show up for a job, then you can become homeless, which, in fact, my healing journey took long enough that I did become homeless before I was able to finish healing far enough, if you will. So that's yet another reason I come back to social media with a podcast to talk to you guys, because it is that serious. And I think that we're at this critical mass stage where a lot of people are tapping out. A lot of people are so traumatized that they really need a hand. And it's also happening at this juncture where there's not much help out there, at least not from the institutions that we're told to turn to. When I became homeless, I went to DSS the night I had nowhere to sleep, nowhere to go. And they turned me away because I had $185 in my account. And I think about that day all the time, not in a place that keeps me tethered to an old timeline, but in a place where I remember what it was like to feel that I had nowhere to turn to and how scary that was. And it motivates and inspires me to continue to reach to the people who are lost, who are broken, who have been through so much emotionally and on their soul that they feel unrecoverable. That's how I felt. I felt like I was beyond help. I didn't understand why my body was shutting down or why things were so bad. And I was too suppressed to spend the time researching. I was truly like in a shut down state. So that's who I'm speaking to and for. That's who I ask God to allow me to reach when I'm speaking. I have big love for the underdogs, for the people who have an amalgamation of different traumas which plague them, and they don't know where to even start. I love you guys. That's why I show up now. So back to the journey, right? So I'm like a monk. I'm in the woods. I get to this furnished Airbnb. I'm so glad it's furnished because I didn't have the energy to move a darn thing. I collapse onto the futon in the living room, and I stayed on that futon for about 6 weeks. I gave myself permission to rest. That was the overwhelming feeling, is I'm so tired. I need to rest. I need to rest right now. Like my life depends on it. I need to rest without somebody yelling at me, without somebody telling me that I'm lazy, without somebody shaming me. And I gave myself permission to not shame myself for rest. If you've ever been in a position where you feel drained, like the life has been sucked out of you, you might just need a 6-week nap. You literally might just need to hibernate for a while. That's how you would really kickstart a good old-fashioned spiritual awakening, is don't shame yourself for the rest that you need. We are not machines. We are not meant to be pumping out product and performing like robots. We are humans, and we have emotional bodies. And this world is not the kindest towards emotions. A lot of us have had our emotions shamed from a young age. And emotions are literally energy in motion. They get trapped in our bodies when we don't process them out properly. So by the time you reach a rock bottom, a breakdown, if you crash out when you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, it might be because you have emotions that are trapped all throughout your body that you've never dealt with. And so that was the next step of my spiritual awakening, is after I rested, I started taking a good hard look at where I had neglected my emotions, where I had been shaming myself, guilting myself, storing energy in my body that didn't feel right. And all throughout this, I was talking to God as if he was there, as if he was real. You know, I never grew up in a situation where it was like super religious. I never felt connected to the divine. I believed in God, but it was more out of like fear, like we're supposed to. But one thing I noticed is that the people who did believe in a higher power, they had something that I didn't, which they always seemed to feel safe. Like even when bad things were happening, I noticed that they had a sense of peace that I didn't. After being as traumatized as I was, I would wake up in like panic attacks. I was extremely fearful. And I really longed for that sense of safety within and without. So yeah, I was really grateful, not just to be in the woods, away from like outside dangers, away from people who meant me harm, but that I was creating this sense of safety within through faith. And Yeah. So if you're not spiritual of any type, I highly recommend just giving it a go. Like, especially if you're in a rock bottom, reach up to the higher power. You know, we are not just here by ourselves. There is a universe that's looking out for you and divinely orchestrating your life. The best way I can describe the way that I feel that the universe looks out for us is, picture your life as a video game, and you are the main player. You cannot beat a level until you choose to conquer or beat the lessons within that level. You have to learn the lesson in the level that you're in before you are able to ascend to the next level. If you find yourself, for instance, in abusive relationships over and over and over, the same lesson in a different person's body over and over, that means that you're not learning your lesson about valuing yourself, about choosing healthy relationships and people over toxic and dangerous, over F-boys, over people who mean you harm. When you decide to learn that lesson, the universe, God, sees that you're willing to learn and be teachable, and you are elevated just a little bit more. And when I say elevated, it doesn't necessarily mean that that next level is going to be easy. Maybe the next level is, okay, you've been dependent on other people for finances. Now you need to learn how to provide for yourself. And if you don't learn to provide for yourself by giving back to the world or creating or being of service to others, your income will suffer and stagnate. And it's up to you at that point to decide whether or not you're going to show up in the world as a person who contributes and gives back. Now, this is tricky if you've been traumatized. In my case, it took me too long to learn this one, and I ended up homeless. So I talk from experience in this. It is so critical to learn your lessons. If you're highly traumatized, you might be in a state where you're not really functioning optimally to create. And that was sort of where I found myself. And that's why my healing journey became paramount. It's why I placed my health, my inner work, and God at the top of my life. Because I knew that in order to show up meaningfully in the world, I needed to heal myself. So yeah, if you are at some form of rock bottom, although your ascension through the levels is very important, you are not going to be able to do anything if you're not looking out for yourself first. It's like the saying that you can't pour from an empty cup. You cannot pour from an empty cup, you guys. Your cup needs to be full. It needs to be regenerating. And that is a daily practice where you pour into yourself, restoring yourself. Inner work helps restore your psyche, removing negative influences from your life. That helps restore your psyche. It's very important to take care of yourself. Everything else will eventually fall into place. But if you're at a rock bottom, I recommend putting your health, your spirituality, your rest, your vitality, nutrition, all of that at the tip top of your priority list. And so each level that you go through, like they say, new levels, new devils. You're going to have things that are challenging, but the rewards become greater and greater. And as you move through your journey, your inner work, your spiritual awakening, you become more and more equipped to handle the challenges, if that makes sense. So yes, even though new levels, new devils, you are also stronger, wiser, more healed, more balanced, able to create internal safety within. You have all of these things that you're slowly cultivating and building for yourself. So yeah, anyway, I'm out here in the woods doing the whole spiritual awakening thing. I'm resting. I'm talking to God. I'm taking my own self seriously, my inner work, my healing. I'm doing the hard stuff, like willing to look at my shadows. And you guys, a lot of people don't. And a lot of people don't know that they're not. That was kind of where I was for a lot of my life. It doesn't make you a bad person if you're not looking at your shadows for, your first however many years. That doesn't make you a bad person. Most people are just unaware that they're traumatized when they're traumatized. Most people are unaware that they have work to do. They're unaware that they are co-creating their own bad situations. Even, I speak from experience as somebody with a prosthetic wrist from physical abuse, from staying with someone who treated me very poorly. I did not realize the role I played in my own abuse. Meaning I was a vibrational match for that, and I did not see my way out. I did not realize there was a path out. I did not comprehend that was the reality I was subscribing to, that was all I was telling the universe energetically that I felt aligned with or worthy of. Once you begin telling the universe that you are no longer vibrating at the level of turmoil, you are no longer moving in such a way where you align with people who speak down to you, people who put their hands on you. It's a signal, it's an energetic signal to God, and he says, okay, she's ready. Let's give her the reward for no longer energetically aligning with this crap, and let's elevate her. And when you elevate, just so you guys know, when you choose to raise your vibration, the people who were once an energetic match to your frequency, the people who benefited off from you being low vibrational, they will start to fall away. So there is loss involved. So that's part of the surrender, is not just being willing to surrender your path, your journey, your story, but accepting the greater surrender that nothing in life is permanent. Everything is transient. And when you lose people, and especially, if you realize, like, hey, we were both vibrating low together, it doesn't mean you have to look down on them. It doesn't mean you have to dislike them or hate them. You can still love them and thank them for their piece in your journey. And that was a huge part to my spiritual awakening, is finding love, like legit love, you guys, real love, gratitude for every single person that you encounter, even the people who hurt you. A lot of times the people who are hurting you are just as unaware of their unhealed nature as you are. And so the goal is to kind of reverse engineer this whole traumatized world that we live in. So if everyone's going around traumatizing each other, and it keeps getting worse and worse, hurt people, mental illness is contagious. 2020 happened. There's a lot of people who reached breaking points, I think, in the last 5 years. What is most important is turning the ship around, not just for ourselves individually, but collectively. And that's how we start building the new earth. That's how we ascend our souls. In the spiritual communities, they're speaking that the world is shifting from 3D to 5D as we speak. And the timeline that you experience is relevant, respective to how you show up and how you are vibrating. Meaning, we're at a pivotal point where you can choose to have a beautiful timeline or a hell timeline, all based on the choices that you're making and the healing that you're willing to put yourself through. So yeah, pretty much I committed to growth every single day, and in every single way, not just my own growth, but to helping others grow, to showing up as a lighter, happier person, a forgiving person, someone who doesn't hold grudges. Like, when your heart is light, it changes your life. When your side of the street is clean, you don't have to go to bed worrying about negative karma and energy swinging its way back around to you. When you align with the divine and have love in your heart for all of the creatures here, it creates a sense of safety within you that nobody can rob from you. Nobody can say something that's able to shake you when you know that you walk with love and integrity, and that even your enemies you forgive. Love can heal everything, you guys. It's powerful. It's really powerful. So yeah, the spiritual awakening process was kind of painful, kind of beautiful. It was like going into a chrysalis as a caterpillar, and that's not a beautiful experience, to transform from a worm to a butterfly, to grow wings. Like, you're in there, you're wrestling with yourself, you're sweating, you're breaking out of your old form. It's messy. Rock bottom is messy. And I'm so grateful that I was able to be in nature alone with the trees for my healing. It was messy. You have to give yourself so much grace. You start rediscovering the things that you never were connected with, even like your body. A lot of us are shamed out of our bodies, of being connected with them, of touching them, of moving them, stretching them. You have to be willing to look silly in order to break through to peace and acceptance. And what's on the other side of your rock bottom is beautiful. Rock bottom was, in a lot of ways, the most beautiful experience of my life. I never would have made it to a healed state, if I didn't go through the mud. And some flowers grow beautifully in the mud. A lotus grows from the mud. And so that's kind of what a spiritual awakening is like. It can be really raw, really messy, but if you surrender to the process and say, I'm ready to be a lotus, I'm ready to grow my flower out of the mud, and I don't want to have a heavy heart anymore, and I don't want to hurt people anymore, and I don't want to be a hurting person either. You give yourself permission to change radically every day in whatever ways you're able to, even if it's only 1% better a day. And I promise you, your life starts changing, and you'll never regret taking yourself down a path of a spiritual awakening. So yeah, it's like scary as shit also. Like, if you are on a journey of healing and you're like, this is terrible, I don't know what you're talking about, like, yeah, you're right, there's a lot of ugly points. Somatic release and crying and sighing and stretching, like, all of that is important. You literally have to release. A spiritual awakening is also crying multiple times a day if you're really traumatized. It's literally releasing the emotions that you may have never had permission from yourself to release. Yeah, the sun is shining in the room right now, guys. It just distracted the heck out of me. I love y'all. There is happiness, there's bliss on the other side of your trauma and on the other side of your rock bottom. And it's just a timeline jump away. It's a little shimmy, a shuffle to the side that you have to make each day. It doesn't have to be big leaps. Healing can be delicate, but there is another reality available to you, one where things are beautiful and aligned, and Anyway, you guys, I love you. Thanks for hanging with me for this episode. I'll see you in the next one. Be safe. Be blessed, because you are more than you know.